Today, my special guest went from successful actress to success strategist. And now she helps millionaires find success and fulfillment in all of the most important areas of their lives. Let me introduce you to Barbara Doust.
Welcome to the Summiteers Podcast, a show for peak performers who are seeking success and fulfillment in all the most important areas of their lives. Each week, we explore what it really takes to create a life that you truly love in every way. A life that has meaning, purpose, and is balanced across every area of your life that matters. And now, here's your host, Dr. Don Cote.
All right, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Don Cote, your host, and I am privileged here to have my guest with me today, Barbara Doust.
Well,
Barbara,
thank you for
welcome.
having me, Don.
So Barbara and I were talking before we went on air that the conversation that we're going to have today, I'm unlikely to be able to have the same kind of conversation with too many of my guests going forward because she's actually an expert in this topic and not many people are. So what we're talking about is a concept that I affectionately call the manifestation loop. And that idea is that we've got an idea that turns into a belief somehow. Either our parents told us this was what was so, or some way we came up with the idea that we have a belief. And that belief is what generates our actions. And those actions result in some behavior. So get some kind of result because of that. And that result turns out to be evidence that reproves that this must be true. And so we just stay in that cycle. But as Barbara and I have talked, in order to improve your life, things have to change. And it has to start way back at the beginning by changing the beliefs, because if you don't change the beliefs, the behaviors stay the same and so do the results. So Barbara, tell us a little bit about your background when it comes to this topic, because as I mentioned, you are an expert.
Well, thank you. I've been working with a lot of people on this very topic for many, many years. And in reflecting just upon myself, I work with people aiming for what some people might call a big, hairy, audacious goal. I call it a worthy ideal, progressing, towards an aim, a desire, a strong desire, really digging deep into what excites you and what scares you at the same time in order to get out of the comfort zone, right? So it's once we move outside the comfort zone, call it a stretch goal or, aiming for a future identity, whatever it is that's going to take us away from the familiar, from the thinking mind that we already have, then we start to think differently when we start to aim outside that comfort zone. And what I've noticed with a lot of people is that the old self really puts up a royal battle and starts fighting and kicking along the way. And what I notice with my groups is that about the first 3 weeks are great, where they start changing their thinking, they're inspiring one another, and opportunities are showing up, synchronicities are happening, they're getting really excited about their lives, they're feeling alive. And then about week 4 or 5, I'm getting so many phone calls. What's going on? This isn't, my wife this, my husband that, my kids this, and all the resistance starts to fly in their faces, right? And I'm so used to those like week 4, week 5 of the program where people, the resistors, one of my clients calls them the dementors from the Harry Potter series, and he sends me pictures of these flying dementors that are coming in. But to point out that until we bring those ideas, those beliefs, those paradigms to the conscious level, it's very challenging to change them. But it's all about awareness. And so once our thinking starts to change, our awareness starts to expand, and we're always designing from our level of awareness. I have a lot of people coming back in and doing the same program over and over and over again because they get to they make a leap into a future identity that's, really stretching them. And then they think they're okay, they've got it, but then they fall out of the work and stop doing the work because automation takes over, or hanging out with people who don't believe in them, or the naysayers who are constantly challenging, and also clients that are becoming more and more difficult, or maybe they're having more success and there's jealousy or resentment. And then they come back in order to aim a little higher to bring up again those resistors and how to develop what I call adaptive capacity, not just going back to what, homeostasis is where we want to go to, right? Back to that comfort zone.
Right.
And sometimes what happens when we make that stretch is we find the go-to homeostasis place, but we go back even further, and then we're challenged again with like, well, I'm stuck. Why do I feel this way again? It's happening all over again. But it really is just time to stretch again, and and acknowledge, what is that limited belief? What is the story? And when I think about myself, Don, because as you were talking, I
Mhm.
started thinking about even like what's an example in my own life. I love this lesson that I do on Praxis, which is the integration of belief with behavior. So we
Mhm.
can have a belief on a conscious level, such as I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, right? But we're not doing it. So where's the integration of belief with behavior? And usually it's that fear, that paradigm, that belief, the pattern at the subconscious level that isn't aligning. And so if I look at myself in that I had um, let's say a bachelor's in theater, I had a master's in directing, I ran a theater company, I had a show at the Kennedy Center, I worked on TV and film sets with celebrities. And so if I were to say, I want to produce a Broadway show, and then I look at, well, it's not happening, right? Why is it not happening? But on the
Mhm.
conscious level, I believe I can. I have all the experience in the world. I have all the knowledge. I have the relationships. All of that is, all the pieces are there. And if I have but it has to be a burning desire, right? And so if I have the burning desire to do it, then that's the time to do the work on, what is the belief underneath that's inhibiting it.
Right.
And so I'll look at well, what am I afraid of? And it might be something like, gosh, I don't like to ask people for money,
Mhm.
and then if I go into, I don't like to ask people for money, well, I'm not necessarily going to produce a Broadway show if I can't ask people for money, right? And then if I look at, well, where did that belief come from? And it's a big paradigm in my upbringing. Like we were sharing, my father was one of 14 children, and my mom was one of 6. And the idea was, you don't ask people for money. Not only don't you ask people for money, you don't ask people for help. So if I'm holding on to that
Right.
belief, no matter where I am, there I am, not asking for money. It doesn't even mean a Broadway show. It's with clients, it's with working on sets, whatever it is, the value. It wasn't until I started doing this work and I had been in the entertainment business that I saw, oh my gosh, I didn't understand my value and my worth in order to be able to understand the belief behind it that stopped me from asking. So now what I encourage people to do is, when you unveil that and discover it, is what are incremental steps to start teaching your subconscious mind you're not going to die, right? Because that's what it feels like. So I started practicing, well, let's Dawn, we're at a cafe. I'm sorry, I forgot my wallet in the car. Could you buy my coffee for me today? Right? And as soon as you say yes, subconscious is going, oh, okay, didn't die, you know,
Did it.
did it.
Did it.
Next time it might be a parking lot, or next time it might be, a fundraiser, or it might be a restaurant, or it's that. And then, that's what I call adaptive capacity, and growing into teaching oneself that the thinking, the altering the belief that you can't ask for money. But then it takes some practice. It doesn't just all of a sudden, I'm going to produce a Broadway show and I'm asking you for $100,000.
I remember it was a huge revelation for me. I had read Think and Grow Rich, and I know we're both fans of Think and Grow Rich. I had read probably 50 times, no exaggeration. And it dawned on me at the end of chapter 1, he's got a quote, which is really famous, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And my struggle was that I was unaware of is you were talking about that conscious belief, right? So I had these conscious ideas that I could do it. But then I realized that the subconscious belief, that all the beliefs are in the subconscious, and they're like software
Yeah.
in your
Yes.
computer. They run everything except you can't see them,
Exactly.
right? You can't see the software. It's just there doing stuff. But whatever the software says, if you press the A key, you're going to get A on the screen every single time because that's what the software
right.
says. And so until you change the belief, the software in your subconscious mind, and then I'm like, but it's subconscious, it's below the consciousness. How do I know what the beliefs are? And I struggled with that for a while. And then I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, well, that's easy. And I'm like, easy? How to figure out what's in my subconscious mind? That's easy. They're like, just look at your
Right.
behavior. Your behavior indicates what you believe because you won't act inconsistent to your beliefs. I'm like, okay, so if I'm doing this, I must believe that. Holy cow, do I really believe that? And then I was really shocked at some of the things that I was noticing that I was like, well, it's hard to argue with that because that's the activity. And to your point about, you've got to act inconsistent with that belief for a little bit in small little bites. But then the other thing that I just recently learned, maybe in the last year or two, is that unless you look at the results you get from that, asking for somebody to pay for your coffee, it's very easy to look at that and say, yeah, but that's just a cup of coffee, and really discount that new evidence that it's possible, because a belief is nothing but a feeling of certainty about something based on some evidence that you have. So you get this new evidence, and then you go and discount it, right? So that's a really important part. And I know we talked about this the other day. It's a really important part to make sure that you take that evidence and acknowledge it as the evidence that proves the new belief. But even more importantly, you can actually go back and say, okay, so that's the belief that I don't want, that's not working. What would the idea have to be that I would need to have as a belief in order to get the outcome that I really want as a knee-jerk reaction, right? So there's inspiration, which I call that, from the pulpit or the podium, right? Someone does a speech and everybody's inspired and they run out to their cars. By the time they get to the parking lot, they're uninspired again, or maybe when they get home. And then there's motivation, which everybody's like, you just got to be motivated, right? So that's internal, right? Having reasons, your why. But then I discovered there's another whole level called compulsion. That's when you can't help it. Right? You just can't help yourself. What if all the behaviors that you needed to have to get the result that you want, it was compulsive, like you couldn't help it? Well, it would be if all the beliefs lined up. So the question comes, and this is where your expertise, I want to hear what you have to say, all the wisdom that you can espouse to our audience. Like, what does one do? What's like the first step to say, okay, I got these behaviors, these outcomes that I don't want. What do I do now? What do you tell your clients?
Well, first of all, like you said, it's noticing. I truly believe like everything is conscious awareness. And how do you change your conscious awareness? If you're not reading or hanging out with people that raise you or elevate you, or if you're not using your imagination, if you're not being stimulated by, pictures that are really inspiring, right? That it's very important to notice. And then through the acknowledgement, make decisions. And I say to people, only change a couple of habits at a time. And the big, the big question really, and to stay consistent with the habit, right? So that you notice, at least 30 days in a row. For me, it takes more than 90 days to change a habit for some reason, but there's that, you go to the gym, it's 3 weeks and then you're out, and if you look at, I work with success habit charts with my clients, and by day 3, all the resistors are up, but it's like really acknowledging like the behavior, but then when you see the behavior, it's what's the thought behind that? What are you noticing behind that? Are you, sometimes it could just be you're tired, and do not make a decision when you're tired, right? The prefrontal cortex, I've done a lot of work in neuroscience and a lot of work on brain study. I'm halfway through a certification with Dr. Daniel Amen on, on brain health, because a lot of people are not considering how synapses are fired off, how chemicals in our bodies, and how a thought creates a chemical, and how that chemical creates an emotion, and how misinterpretation can happen. Sometimes we'll have a feeling. I truly believe that we create through feeling, but sometimes our
Mhm.
feelings are addictive states. Like to be able to distinguish, a feeling that's really a feeling versus one that's addictive, right?
Can you unpack that just a little bit more? Because that's pretty profound what you're saying right
Well,
now.
like if I'm stirring a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden, and I'm singing, you got to work hard for your money, got to work hard for your money, and I'm not even aware of it, right? And then all of a sudden
Mhm.
there's like anxiety, and yet I have a roof over my house, I've got, I'm in comfortable clothes, a wonderful environment, a beautiful, cup holding my coffee, yet I'm feeling anxiety. So I call that an addictive state, right? That's a go-to. That was
Okay.
a trigger based on, you got to work hard for your money. And if I'm coming from a family that
Mm.
says you don't ask anybody for money, right? Then it's that pattern then is probably going to lead me. Yeah,
Reinforcement.
and it's probably going to lead me to the refrigerator. It's going to lead me to sitting down with my cats, it's going to lead me to, finding just calmness. But then there's also, regulation of nervous system, all kinds of factors that need to be unpacked, right? But to your point about compulsion, that's why in the work that I do, it's to go after what you really, really, really want and have a burning desire, as Napoleon Hill says, right? And aim in
Mhm.
the direction, and then all the obstacles will fall away. But it's being aware of the potential for obstacles. I like to say to people, the solution already exists. You have to find the problem to get to the solution. So we're creating the problem to find the solution, right? But
Yeah, it's just like going to the gym. If you don't challenge your muscle, it won't grow, right? So as humans, we need to be challenged. We need those problems to solve so that we grow to become worthy of the result that we want.
exactly. And it's also to be able to understand the difference between, healthy stress and unhealthy stress.
Right.
So, and one is the unhealthy stress is usually what we create around, you know, limiting beliefs or false evidence appearing real, which is the fear, the doubt, the worry, and it's pre-planning a negative future that doesn't exist. That kind of stress, is really the old self just kicking, against the change. And that's why even for myself, it was so important to after I lost my husband suddenly, it was just a couple of months before our 25th wedding anniversary. We were in our 40s. And I just went on a journey of why was change so complicated because it was the roughest part and journey in my life.
Mhm.
And I just I didn't understand how the mind functioned. I didn't understand, chemistry, biochemistry. I didn't understand really the body mind spirit connection because most people are either focused on body or they're focused on spirit or they're focused on intellectual, right? I mean, I go to the unemployment office and speak to PhDs who are out of work. And why is that? And they've got all the knowledge in the world, but all the knowledge in the world,
Right.
it's your A students are not the ones who are having business success,
Right.
and there's a reason for
So,
that.
yeah. Yeah, it's true. 5 years out of my high school, the C students, all the A students were working for the C students.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know, even with, in this world of, like you said, it's the manifestation loop, right? That even when I was not aware of these concepts and principles, I would consider myself an unconscious competent. And I would do things, but the things that I manifested were really a result of compulsion. They were just, you know, I was working with the Olsen twins and came back with $15,000 one month. And I said to my late husband, I really want a house. I really, really want a house, and then I was introduced to a realtor and I called the realtor and I said, it's going to take a year. I'm just now starting this job and I'm just building my income. And I described the house to a T, everything that I described. He called me the next day and said, I have your house. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't have the money. So he says, you have to see the house. And in the meantime, I had been driving blocks, taking down numbers of houses and just obsessed and reading books on buying your first home and, and crying every night to my late husband saying, I want a house. I want a house, and then this realtor brings me to this house. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't have the money. And he said, well, make an offer. And Don, I kid you not, I made an offer on the house that was half off the asking price. He gave it to me.
Manifesting. I love it. I love it. It's funny. I run into people, used to run into people that would say, I hear about this manifesting thing. I just wish I could figure out how to manifest stuff. And I would say to them, and I got the strangest looks. I would say, but you're a manifesting machine. Do you not realize that your entire life, everything that is you have in your life, everybody that's around you in your life, where you live, what you drive, the clothes you wear, you manifested all of that. Like your life looks exactly the way it should based on your manifesting
Yeah,
capability.
exactly. It's
Yeah. And they're like,
24/7.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. The question is, are you controlling that?
Yes.
Are you managing that, right? Or is it just happening, right? So are you living by design or by default?
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Well, and like with the work that you ask very, very powerful questions. And that's what starts to help people elevate because you're illuminating, right? And through those
Mm.
conversations, that's when we can go deeper. Whereas my mentor would say, 1% of the population thinks, 2% think they think, and 97% would rather die than think.
Sadly, that may be accurate. I think the people that are watching this podcast are probably in that 1%, right? And so they're not really aware that the rest of the world isn't like
Mhm.
us. The rest of the world isn't asking those difficult
Yeah.
questions to force yourself. I mean, I think my go-to is always Einstein, right? He asked impossible
Mhm.
questions of himself, and that's why when they weighed his brain after he died, most people's brains are about 3.5 pounds. His was 8 because he just kept
Yeah.
pushing himself to, think at a higher level. And that's what I love about our group, the Summiteers
Mhm.
community, is that it's a group of people who challenge each other to think at a higher
Yes.
level and ask those difficult questions to get us to, be able to access more of our
Mhm.
capability. I think we talked about this in our meeting today, as a matter of fact, that I believe human potential is unlimited, but it's raw
Yes.
material, and then it gets converted into capacity by education and by experience,
Yeah.
right? But then when you look at most people's level of success compared to their level of capacity, it's pathetic. So Tony Robbins, I mentioned to you that I heard Tony Robbins say this for the first time many, many years ago when I was working for him. He said, what humans are capable of is
Yeah.
astounding. What they usually do is
That's
disappointing.
right. Yes.
And so, our goal with Summit Tears is really to just help people to use more of their capacity and do it in a way that's fulfilling and meaningful and purposeful for
Yes.
themselves.
Yes. And also not to be, insignificant, right? It doesn't mean that things stop because spirit is always seeking fuller expression and expansion.
Amen to that. Amen to that. That's pretty high thinking, though, right there. So, Barbara, we've only got a couple more minutes. Tell us this. We probably did this in an inverted fashion, or I did this in an inverted fashion. Tell us about your background a little bit. Like, how did you were in theater originally, but how did you get into life coaching? Because that's well, it would seem to me on the surface, maybe I'm wrong, it seemed to me those are very different areas of expertise.
Absolutely. Well, I started in my youth as a young performer, and my family just didn't understand me or even know what to do with me. But I grew up on the grounds of a psychiatric institution, so I had a blend of really wanting to understand um, what was going on with the mind, and I witnessed a lot.
Wait, you grew up on the grounds of a psychiatric
Institute. Yeah.
facility?
Yes.
How what were you doing there as a kid?
Well, my father was the superintendent,
Uh,
so our home was on the grounds, and you know we were a couple when I was really young. We were a couple of blocks away, but I was visiting my father on the grounds a lot, and then we moved to the grounds and had a house on the grounds and had a lot of, and my whole family worked there. And I also, you know, in the summer worked in different wards. I saw a lot. But
Amen. no doubt.
And so I was always a natural leader as a kid, and I always fought for the underdog. Just, would not accept anybody calling anybody names, and I would always be defending, and especially knowing and having the awareness of, the people that I saw at the institution. Um, my father was French, my mother was English. The French were hating the English were hating the French. So I was always defending either the French or defending the English. So it was always this, seeing both sides of the coin. And then, but as a
Interesting.
performer, I stopped performing pretty much as a young person in my early 20s and founded a theater company in San Francisco. And a lot of that was because I didn't feel that people perceived me as a very intelligent human being, so that there was this label of, actors are not smart. At that time, that was the feeling I was getting. Plus, there was a lot of, men having authority, and I was challenging authority. Uh, my father,
Mm.
really raised two girls to do everything and anything that we could do, and he would always say to me every day, it's a man's world. And I would challenge and say it's a woman's world. So we'd be going at it every day,
Wow.
which was really good practice. And then in doing my theater company, I realized, I was like surviving just gig after gig after gig after gig after gig. And then when I moved to Los Angeles to get my master's in directing, and from there was able to get on the set with the Olsen twins and was their acting coach for 10 years and founded an
Mm.
acting academy. So all along the way, Don, do you see the thread? I was pulling performance out of people.
Yeah,
And I was
interesting.
really passionate about people believing in themselves and their ability. And I was also very passionate because I was a perfectionist. I was very passionate about encouraging people to fail and make mistakes and pick
Mm.
themselves up, because I wish I had been taught that. I had always been, supercharged for success, go after success. And here I am, a success strategist and working with people on achieving success. But I work at a different concept of success. And, but that's what I was doing. I was just helping. I see in people what they don't see in themselves. I see the kernel. And then even in character building, I'm now doing more of my own work around building the identity. And how do you build an identity? How do you shift into a new identity? How do you embody the, be, do, have concept? It's really, you don't get what you want, right? It's, you get who you are being. And how do you
Right.
shift that and move into that identity, even though you feel like an imposter. So
And many people do, even though they have some level of success, and wonder why, and mostly wonder why secretly, so they don't get the help that they need.
yes, yeah, and I consider being an imposter just moving into something you don't know how to do, and so it's called
Hmm.
growth. You can put on a tutu and it doesn't make you a ballerina, but it sure does make you. I
Make me
know,
one.
no, but you might start feeling like one, right? You know,
Okay, all right. I'm gonna go
yeah,
try
you
that.
might start feeling, that there's an impulse there, and it depends on if it excites you or not. I'm now taking flamenco classes because I had a desire, and it was about exploring the desire. I got into class. I did not feel good. I wasn't doing well, but I knew it took persistence, and I knew it took getting to the next level. I felt like a total imposter, but I'm putting it on and getting better and getting better and getting better. And now I'm having fun. So it's really the stories we tell ourselves, the meaning we give it. And that's how, when I went on a journey of finding out why change was so complicated, I ended up in a master's program in spiritual psychology and certified in a quantum success academy. And then I met Bob Proctor in 2013. And that's what radically shifted my business, because of the concept of going after something that really excites you and challenge and scares you at the same time,
And
and finding out
Mhm.
in your heart, do you truly desire it? Like I'll work with a client who's an HR director and who wants to have, more promotions. And maybe by the seventh lesson, um, they come to me and say, no, I really want a vineyard in Tuscany. And then the things that start to happen are very interesting.
Yeah, I remember reading Think and Grow Rich the first few times, maybe in the first 10 times, and making a list of things that I wanted, and then questioning, do I
Yeah.
really? Is it and then, Napoleon Hill had a huge impact on my life. That book, I've lost count after reading it 100 times, but I started to question, how do you know if something is actually a burning desire? And so it was a struggle for me for a long time. I put down ideas and I thought, well, that's what
Yeah.
society's telling me I'm supposed to do. What do I really
Mhm.
want? And I was so tied to all the beliefs that I had gotten through, I mean, I think I said this again this morning in our meeting, we're born into this world and a conversation's already going on. And if you're born into a first world country, that conversation is likely about
Yeah.
capitalism. It's likely about, the bigger house, the nicer car, the fancy watch, the expensive suits, and the travel to exotic places, right? It's all about that. So then how do you separate yourself, going back to your point about identity? How do you separate yourself and find out what you truly desire, separate from what you've been told over and over and over that you should desire? And so I did a lot of shoulding on myself, trying to figure that out. And then when all was said and done, it was easy to look back and say, well, I should have
Yeah.
known
Yes.
that, but it's so difficult. So we're helping people with identity shifts so that they can be more fulfilled is very worthy work. And I think I'd love to have you back on the show. I know I'd love to have you back on the show, and we can explore this conversation of
Yeah.
this concept of helping people shift their identity so they really and truly do love their life the
Right.
way they
Yeah.
should.
Thank you.
Barbara, thanks for being here. I appreciate you. Listen, everybody, we're hoping you're going to tune in again next week for another episode, but I'm so grateful to my guest, Barbara, for sharing her words of wisdom with you. I hope you got a lot, and tune in next week.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Something you heard today resonated with you. Your next step is simple. Subscribe to The Summiteers newsletter. Download the free Peak Performers self-evaluation. The link is below in the show notes. The self-evaluation will only take a few minutes to complete, and you will instantly know where you can make small changes that will make a big difference in your life. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast now, mark your calendar, and don't forget to tune in every Friday. Until next time, remember, climbing together is better.